Wellness, mindfulness, energetic programs, they're popping up all over the world these days. Today, we're talking with Joey Hurl, the founder of Joga Wellness, located in Byron Bay Australia, about the practices of Mana Kai. It's a program that teaches methods to support a greater well-being, things like energy work, plant medicine, breath work, even concepts like 3D versus 4D and 5D, which we'll talk a little bit about today. But it's a fantastic interview. I hope you stick around, and don't forget to hit that like button and the subscribe button. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
What I was able to do was go into the big traumas that I experienced and almost rewrite the story, recreate what actually happened in those moments. It's not to say that those things didn't happen and I'm pretending that they didn't. It's just that there's not so much of an emotional charge when I think about them now. And it's completely healed my relationship with family and with myself, which is ultimately the goal.
So you're in Australia? What part?
in Byron Bay.
Okay.
So it's kind of like the spiritual epicenter of Australia.
Really? Okay. Is that near Sydney, or where is that?
It's actually in New South Wales, so the same state as Sydney, but we're really close to the Queensland border. So we're like maybe a 10-hour drive up from Sydney.
Oh, okay. So you're not real close. Gotcha.
No, Australia's so big that it's an hour flight, and so that feels close, but not to drive, no.
So you were saying that the area that you're in is kind of like an epicenter of like spiritual people.
Yeah.
Why is, it's interesting, so I talk to people all over the place, but I've talked to, as far as overseas is concerned, the biggest hub of people overseas so far for me has been Australia.
Yeah, interesting.
Why do you think so? What's going on over there that's making that that's attracting people like yourself to that area?
Yeah, so Byron Bay, so they say that you're drawn here for specific reasons. I've lived in Australia for 9 years now, and I visited Byron Bay when I first arrived in Australia, and something in me was like, I need to live there at some point. I didn't understand it at the time, and to be honest, I hadn't really even engaged in spiritual practices at that time. I just knew I needed to be here. Yeah.
Your inner self still knew, even though you weren't completely synced up yet.
Yeah, exactly. They say that there's a big Obsidian crystal that sits underneath, there's various crystals that sit underneath the land here, and that the energy from those crystals draws you into the place. And they say that you either get drawn in and you stay, or you get spat out. And it's a very transient place. So pre-COVID, there were heaps of travelers, and it would just be a constant kind of shift of people and energy, I guess. Wow. But it's very, very intense energy. So when you come here, you really have no choice but to do the deep work on yourself. And I think people are drawn here, perhaps they're a light worker, perhaps their purpose is something greater than they even realize, which I think is probably what happened with me. I was working in a corporate job for many years, and I always had a vision of what I wanted to create.
I'll tell you what, before we start going down that path, and that's fine. I want to hear about that. That's one of my questions. Thank you so much for being here. You are the founder of Joga Wellness in Australia and the practice of Mana Kai. And I was doing a little reading, and it mentioned that your programs, they can help supercharge your confidence and rediscover your core essence. So I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit about that. So we had talked a little bit before, and so you were saying that you weren't really spiritual. What what put you on this path to doing what it is you're doing today?
Yeah, good question. For me, my journey really began, um, as a child, as it always does. I experienced a lot of anxiety growing up, and I've been surrounded by family members and friends who've also experienced both anxiety and depression and mental health issues. So my passion for as long as I can remember has been to, well, for one thing, help myself to move away from the anxiety, depression, and many other things that come with that, but also to help others move out of those dark spaces, and back into the light. And so my journey really began with probably more in the 3D world, which is what I'll talk to a little bit as we go, but more just exploring, health and wellness, fitness, and nutrition, and just understanding what worked well for my body. But
What was like the
and
turning point for you? What was like,
yeah,
aha, oh, this is the road I need to go down.
yeah, I studied yoga teacher training
Okay.
about 5 years ago, and that just completely changed my world and opened my mind to a whole new way of living, and a whole new understanding that there's multi dimensions and there's so much more than what we perceive in the physical world. Yeah, so that really took me from, I guess, just seeing movement and breath and nutrition and just general wellness, as seeing it as kind of, I guess, almost a band-aid. Like, how can I just fix? I was always trying to fix myself. So how can I fix this? And then when I studied yoga teacher training, it helped me to realize that I don't need fixing. For all of us, life is a journey of self-discovery and ultimately coming home to ourselves and remembering who we are and our core essence. And the yoga journey really helped me on that path. Since then, and since moving to Byron Bay, which I mentioned is a very spiritual place, I've then gone on to go a lot deeper and explore many different healing modalities, predominantly to support myself, but then also with an intention to use that information to help others. So
What kind
I've
of, can you
gone,
list off some of the other healing modalities that you
yeah,
work with?
yeah. So I'm now trained in, I'm a Reiki practitioner. So
Okay.
I used to have Reiki sessions and then understood the impact that was having on my life. And so wanted to also train in that. Kinesiology. I
So muscle
engaged,
testing, arm test, right?
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I engaged in the spiral last year, which is, I don't know if you've heard of that before, but that's a kinesiology kind of based process focusing on the chakra system, and I guess clearing each energy center.
Hmm.
And you're going very, very deep into your past and the old stories and the old patterning and the old trauma, and you're clearing at each of those levels.
Wow.
So there was the spiral. Plant medicine has been a huge part of my journey in the last 2 years. And I really
What kind
believe
of
that
plant medicine?
predominantly psilocybin.
Okay.
And for me, that is such a beautiful, natural way to support people and take that edge off anxiety, take that edge off that almost sad feeling that you can become almost addicted to. And it just even just microdosing like the tiniest little bit
Mhm.
can help you remember again your core essence, and it can help move you from your mind back into your body and back into your heart. And I think that's really
Yeah,
what
and it
I
also opens up a lot of your neural pathways that aren't otherwise open. And with the
absolutely.
microdosing, my understanding is that um, like it's kind of like going to the gym. If you flex that muscle more often, it's more prone to stay bigger in the case of a muscle. And those neural pathways are more prone to staying open if they're used. And if psilocybin is one of those things that open up those pathways that it's very helpful in what I've read and heard about as far as depression, anxiety, and all that stuff. And what's interesting, so I am probably mile and a half, well, as the crow flies, from Johns Hopkins, and they have one of the biggest studies on psilocybin and its positive effects. So yeah, it's interesting as that becomes a little bit more mainstream, the stuff that I've been hearing about it, and I agree with you. It's been very beneficial, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty life-changing. Yeah, just as you say, like in terms of how it can really start to rewire and reshape our brains and move us from kind of those more negative patterns that we have. And yeah, so it's just about recreating those neural pathways, and which is exactly also what the other practices that I engage in do. And the Mana Kai practice that I created last year, a big part of that, I mean, the main concept behind it is helping people move from their head to their heart. Because when we live from that space, we're not living in fear, we're living in love. And ultimately, that's what we want to all move back to, because that's our core essence. And things like psilocybin, things like I've done MDMA therapy, and I've never actually recreationally taken MDMA, but I've done it in a therapy format. And that was, again, life-changing for me. It healed so many past stories and traumas and things that I had tried to heal through so many other modalities and so many other processes, such as, talk therapy, I guess kind of the normal processes that we are introduced to across our lifetimes, but not energy focused processes. And there's definitely a need for things like talk therapy. And I'm sure it, really helped me in some ways at the time. But I find with, MDMA therapy, psilocybin, microdosing, energy work, you're not just putting a band-aid on something, you're actually going into the body and you're clearing from the inside out.
Well, I feel like with talk therapy, it's largely about conscious work, stuff that you're already familiar with, and you kind of talk through it and you try and uncover stuff that isn't quite as visible to you, which is hard to do. Probably the plant medicine and energy work that taps into a part of the subconscious that, it's not easy to tap into, right? And it reveals stuff that would not otherwise be revealed very easily through more traditional therapies. That's my own take, but it seems to make sense because, I've had different tried different sort of therapies, and, energy medicine really works for me. And some of these other things also can bring information to my awareness. And even if it just makes me aware of something, that's the first step. It's like, oh, really? Oh, okay. I need to work on that. And it at least gives you that first step. But many of these methods can take you far beyond that, because when you're aware of it, you can then start to work through it. And if you're in this energetic state or altered state, it'll take you to places that you can't otherwise get into when you're in a more, a 3D kind of a place.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you say is, Mana Kai, what would you say is the one of the things that are most unique about that program?
Mana Kai was created last year because I was working with a number of different practices each day to support my own self in moving from my head to my heart, which is, I feel like, a lifelong journey, especially for someone that has experienced anxiety in the past, and for a good chunk of time. Breath work, as you mentioned, is one of the most powerful ways and simplest ways that we can really connect with our inner wisdom. We can completely shift our physiology. And it's free and it's so simple and it's so powerful. So breath work, I was introduced to properly last year. I was practicing that every day. I was practicing various forms of movement every day. I was practicing meditation and visualization techniques every day. And my morning routine was almost 3 or 4 hours long because I was using all of these different practices, which I found so powerful. And I wanted to bring them all together into one modality, which is why I created Mana Kai. The other side of it is connection. So that's the fourth touch point or touchstone with Mana Kai. And connection means connection to ourselves. So that's a really big part of it. It means connection to those around us and connection to the elements. So living in Byron Bay, where I am, I was in the hinterland for a good period of time, and you're surrounded by nature and the most beautiful trees and birds. And when you live in that environment, you feel more connected than ever to the different elements around you. And I had a deep knowing that needed to come into the practice, because the more that we're all energetic beings, we're all connected. So whether it's humans connecting, whether it's animals, plants, whatever it is, we're all energetically connected. So I created the practice to deepen that connection and support people in deepening that connection, because the more we tune into those connections, the smoother our lives are, and the more that we can start to shift our consciousness, which is so needed in the world right now.
Yes.
That was a really big part of why I created it. And obviously, coming from there being a pandemic in the world and various other big things going on, I could see the need for connection more than ever, but not just with each other, but also to the outside world.
Right. So I wanted to add that, so you do a lot of workshops like in person, you also do remote work. So anybody listening to this program or anybody not listening to this program can get a hold of you. I mean, actually through the Healing Hub, we do have practitioner page, and like your information will be on that page, of course, and people can reach out to you and you can have one-on-one sessions with you. You can do different, online workshops, so forth and so on. So I wanted to throw that out there so people were aware of, even though you're in Australia, it doesn't matter so much. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, if someone watching this happens to be not in Australia, it's not a big obstacle. You can do everything through Zoom these days. What would you say is one of the more, and you can take a minute and pause and think about this, but I am curious, do you have any like transformational experiences that either you yourself experienced or that you witnessed occurring, something you were like, wow, this is amazing. This is why I do this.
Well, 2 experiences have been probably the most powerful. MDMA therapy that I mentioned before. Am I able to talk about MDMA therapy? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, cool.
I'm not promoting it. It's something that happened, and it's something that helped you. And I think people want to hear that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So one of the most powerful experiences was through MDMA therapy. And for me, the process is that you're looked after by a trained therapist, and you're given a very specific amount of MDMA, which, as we know, opens the heart space. You then have a therapist that for the entire time, which is about a 5-hour journey, you can chat to, and it helps you to open your heart so that you can start to process very deep stories, traumas from the past that you may not be able to through normal talk therapy. And I had a very interesting experience because for me, I had the therapist with me. You're very comfy. You're lying on like a giant bean bag. You've got an eye pillow and everything's like beautiful around you just to give you as much comfort as possible. And as soon as I put that eye pillow or eye mask on, for most of those 4 or 5 hours, was completely internal. And I didn't actually feel the need to speak to somebody because my body, my energy, my subtle body knew exactly what to do. So I started to process very big things I dealt with as a child and, at school and then growing up. Things that I have been so stuck in my body and I haven't been able to move past through so many different modalities. I still haven't been able to fully release and heal these parts of myself. But when I was in this therapy session, it was so internal and it was so magic. And it was like I was seeing like a video of all these beautiful moments from my childhood, like all these things that my mind had blocked because I was very fixated on traumas and I was very fixated on big things that happened that I couldn't seem to get past. And suddenly it was this beautiful remembering of a beautiful childhood that I had and the love that I had from my parents and these incredible experiences that I had growing up. And what I was able to do was go into the big traumas that I experienced and almost rewrite the story, recreate what actually happened in those moments. And it's the most powerful experience I've had in terms of healing my past. It's not to say that those things didn't happen and I'm pretending that they didn't. It's just that there's not so much of an emotional charge when I think about them now. And it's completely healed my relationship with family and with myself, which is ultimately the goal. So
how do you think MDMA differs for you than, say, psilocybin?
Yeah, good question. I think for me, MDMA, the purpose is to fully open up your heart. For me, psilocybin allows me to, I fully believe that what you're seeing when you're microdosing psilocybin is actually the reality of the world. So for me, if I'm in nature, everything is so beautiful. So plants are really bright and the sounds that you hear are emphasized and there's so much beauty around. I always imagine with psilocybin, because they're plants, we were always meant to find them. It was always supposed to be part of our experience at some point in our lifetime. Not every person on this planet, but as a species, we were meant to find these plants because they are there to bring us back to the reality of the beauty of our planet and the beauty of how life can be. And I think they also help you to see beyond the 3D realm. And I think they help you to access other realms because we're multi-dimensional beings. And so many of us are so focused on this 3D realm, it's very hard to understand that there are other dimensions and there are other realms and other ways of being. And I think psilocybin really opens us up to infinite possibility and infinite potential.
Gotcha.
And you start to see what you can have access to. I think.
So you think, so MDMA, it's kind of like you can remember stuff from the past more easily maybe, but it comes from a heart space and kind of puts a nice positive spin on maybe an event that occurred in the past. And you're saying the psilocybin really just, it can open up to the multiple layers of reality.
Yeah.
And all that makes sense. And I did want to, emphasize kind of something that you had said, that, that what you're talking about is not like a college throwback, pop the shrooms or pop the MDMA. It's like a controlled setting. You even mentioned the, putting stuff over your eyes, so you minimize your senses, so you have limited outside stimulus, right? And you can really kind of focus inward on, where you're going to go. What's this journey about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very
and
focused.
I've heard, many magical stories about the effects of, well, I would say more so psilocybin, although, MDMA is becoming more present for sure.
There have been many studies to show how much it supports people with depression, with anxiety, with PTSD. PTSD is probably one of the main focuses, because
it's legal for veterans. I don't remember maybe in DC. Anyway, in one of our states recently, psilocybin was legalized for people of service.
Yeah,
that
incredible.
have been in the service.
Yeah.
To help treat, what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think both can help treat PTSD, depression. And that's what these studies are showing over and over again, the power of them. Okay. With the reason I created Mana Kai, another reason I created it is because I was able to have these powerful experiences through MDMA, through psilocybin, through other modalities. Yet I can create a similar experience through the power of the breath, which is super important because it's legal, it's free, and we all have access to, honestly, different realms through our breath. Depends the type of breath that you're doing. Right. I think there is a place for all of these modalities and all of these different forms of healing, and I'm so grateful that I've had the opportunity to experience these different ones, and each one has helped me heal in different ways. So I see the power of all of them, but as a practice, breath work is such a big part of the Mana Kai practice, but then also moving our bodies and shifting energy through movement. So the movement side of Mana Kai incorporates yoga, and I'm trained in tantric hatha. So tantra is all around prana and energy and the movement of energy and activating your life force. Qigong I incorporate into the practice.
Nice, good.
And sometimes even kung fu. So they're all energy-based practices, and also somatic movement. So it really depends on the type of workshop and the type of class, but the intention is really to help people go beyond those layers to clear at an energetic level, and finish those sessions, those workshops, those classes feeling alive again and feeling unstuck and tuning into your inner wisdom, your inner world, your life purpose. The word mana itself means your innate spiritual power. So what we're doing is we're going deep to enliven your spiritual power, and through that you can create transformation. Wow,
that really sounds fantastic. It's a great program, or at least it sounds like a great program. I'm sure it is.
Yeah. You'll have to do the practice with me sometime.
Yes, I would love that. I really would. Yes. So you mentioned a couple times 3D versus 5D.
Yeah.
Can you educate me a little bit more on what that's all about?
Yeah. So I've mentioned a few times that we exist in multi-dimensions at all times. Many people are living from the mind without this additional awareness that there's something bigger there. And that has kind of been our way of living for so many generations. About 10 years ago, we almost started to move more into a 4D realm, which was almost like the bridge between 3D and 5D. And that's when people, and I know I experienced this myself, but certain people started to experience things like angel numbers, where you would see, like, I don't know if you've heard of angel numbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it was really just an awakening to the fact that there's something more out there. There's something bigger than us. And you can call that God, universe, whatever you want to call that. But there's something bigger than us that's not controlling what's happening. There's just something, there's a greater path for all of us. And I think when we were moving towards that 4D realm, that was opening our eyes to the possibility that there's something greater. The 5D realm, which they say has been fully activated since around 2019, is there's a massive shift in people's awareness of there being something bigger. It's like the earth has been given this energetic upgrade to a higher operating system. And a huge amount of people en masse a couple of years ago were starting to awaken to the fact that there is more to life than what we've always perceived there to be.
Right.
And the more that there has been this shift in consciousness, the more that you can see people now starting to push back against kind of the norms and what we're told is true. And people are starting to question that reality, which is such an important part of, I guess, the progress of the earth and our existence. And you can see, there's a whole new generation of kids who are very awake to the fact that there's more going on here. And, they're the ones that are protesting. They're the ones that are kind of helping almost the adults open their eyes to something bigger. The era that we're moving into is almost integrating a spiritual reality into human reality. And I think people are becoming more and more open to the fact that there is more to life than our physical reality. And even from, the sense of like our own being, we've got multiple layers. So we've got in yoga that they talk about them as these different layers of body, these different sheaths. And the main ones really, we've got our physical body, which is what we all focus so much on, and we certainly have in the past. And now people are realizing that there are other layers. So there's the subtle body, which is our energetic layer. And then that connects to our physiology. So everything is connecting in with each other. So the practices that I'm really passionate about and the practices that I create are integrating the mind, body, and soul, which we've talked about for years, but I don't think there was a real connection or understanding of what it means to do that. But now
I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm seeing people just coming out of the woodwork, saying many of these same things. They're like, there's more. And, and that is in part, why I'm doing what I can to just, if someone is searching for questions, hopefully I can help with that. And people like you, of course, are also helping with that. Programs like you offer are allowing people to open up to things like that. But it's really interesting. Like I got on this path 10 years ago, and I didn't know of too many people that were on this path. I mean, I went to gatherings of people that were on this path, but now I feel like you can openly talk about this stuff and you're not looked at cross-eyed.
Yeah.
Because so there was a movie I saw recently. It was Brad Pitt and Sandra Bullock. I guess you're familiar with Brad Pitt and Sandra Bullock in Australia?
I absolutely am,
yeah.
Yes.
So Brad Pitt was giving Reiki to Sandra Bullock. Of course, then he got shot, but that's beside the point. But it's interesting. I mean, it's all of this is becoming more mainstream, and people are opening up to it. And it's fantastic to see all of the different studies that are taking place. We had talked about Joe Dispenza. His name comes up quite often in my discussions because he does, he has all of this stuff kind of supported by science, data, information that, if you're really kind of skeptical in nature, like I would say I fall into that category generally, you can supply you with, there's many programs out there that like, this is why this works. This is why you're feeling this from afar. This is entrainment. This is quite, quantum physics, and this is how this works, or the theory behind as to why it works. But I think everything is shifting, and which is, I think is what we need. I think we need to shake things up a little bit. And, it's interesting. COVID shook things up a little bit. I think a lot of people became a lot more self-aware because of their regular routine patterns got, off track. Yeah. So let's see. Another question I had here was, well, I'm sorry. Did you want to finish up on what you were talking about? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, just from what you were saying there, Joe Dispenza is an incredible example of somebody who is a scientist, yet he is proving that there's quantum realms that we can access, and that there are infinite possibilities if we're able to access those realms. And he really shows how easy it is for us to access those realms. And I think the more we're moving into this 5D realm, the more people have access to that spiritual reality, and the more people feel connected to that. And the more that we are connected to that, as you say, like, possibilities are endless, and we need this on our planet. And I believe this was always meant to happen. I believe up until this point, I feel like we have been given many, many opportunities over the past few generations to make these big shifts that have needed to happen. And I don't think we've maybe gone down the right paths as a species. And so I think what happened last year, or during the pandemic, it was this massive shift up. It had to be something major had to happen to awaken us to the fact that the lives that we've been living, we can't keep being asleep. Like, we have to become awake to the greater potential and the deeper reality, and these different, even because I'm also quite a skeptic. So we've been talking about different dimensions. I know to so many people in my life can sound, crazy to some, but I also know so many people who wouldn't even consider the idea of, energy-based modalities and practices, and wouldn't even consider, the spiritual realm previously, now are kind of open to there being something more out there that's guiding us. And that's pretty cool.